Chapter 3, Part 2, or Video 2. We're now going to talk about the stages of litigation. To a large extent, whether it's a criminal case or a civil case, once you get started on the trial, it's about the same process. So we do have differences in the pretrial. So in a civil case, in the pretrial, we have what's called the pleadings, discovery, the pretrial before the judge, and then we reach the trial phase. In a criminal case, you're going to have arrest, arraignment, indictment, etc. And then you get to the trial of the case. Okay, and then after a trial, of course, you have post-trial, which means the parties can try and bring motions to set aside the verdict, and then also the rights to appeal. Okay, so in an adversary system, it's important to have an attorney. If it's a criminal case, of course, the state is going to have an attorney, like the U.S. attorney in the federal system, or the prosecuting attorney in the state system, usually the district attorney or the solicitor is the terminology often used. In a civil case, and the defendant, of course, has to hire an attorney, or if they can't afford one is appointed for them, or the public defender represents them, depending upon the system used by the local court. Okay, so if you hire an attorney, the attorney is going to expect to get paid, and there are three types of payment that attorneys can receive. And you'll need to know this for testing purposes. So one is called a fixed fee, another is called an hourly fee, and the third is called a contingency fee. Okay, so a fixed fee is where the lawyer charges X amount for the entire case. Criminal cases are almost always on a fixed fee, occasionally on an hourly fee, never on a contingency fee. That's illegal and unethical. Okay, so a fixed fee, for example, in a civil case, many lawyers charge a fixed fee for a custody case. So they might charge you $5,000 for the entire case. An hourly fee is where the lawyer charges you for each hour of their work, or for the work of a paralegal working under them. And that's how they get their fee. There may be other charges, for example, court costs, court reporter costs for depositions, private investigator, expert witnesses, etc. But the lawyer themselves charges an hourly fee. So they bill you usually on a monthly basis, and you have to pay the accrued amount that has come into play at that point. So if the lawyer charges an hourly rate of $150 an hour and bills you for 4 hours, then you would have to pay 6 hours for that month's work. Contingency fee is a type of fee where the lawyer only gets paid if they win the case. It's most common in personal injury cases, sometimes in civil rights cases, and the lawyer gets anywhere from usually 25% to about 50%. Depends on what's negotiated, and that usually depends upon the difficulty of the case as well as the likelihood of winning. The less likely it is to win, obviously the more likely the lawyers to charge a higher percentage. The lawyer does not get anything unless they win the case. The lawyer takes their fee out of whatever amount is recovered. This does not cover costs. The client is responsible for costs, although the law and ethics allows the lawyers to front the costs if they so choose, and that is a common practice because most of the time the person does not have the money to front the costs or pay the costs of bringing the lawsuit. The lawyer expects to get repaid even if they lose. The reality is that most of the time if you lose, the lawyer's not going to see reimbursement for what they put out for the costs. Okay, so what are the problems with these? Every one of these types of fees has some problematic aspects to it. With a fixed fee, The problem is what happens when the lawyer has totally underestimated the amount of time the case is going to take. Okay? In that situation, the lawyer has an ethical duty to still continue to represent the client as vigorously and zealously as they possibly can. In reality, that's probably not human nature. The lawyer knows that they're not making any money, maybe losing money by doing that, and it would be unethical for the lawyer to try and charge more money when they've already signed a contract saying it would be X amount of money. So that's a problem that exists in those situations. Okay, the problem with hourly fees, by and large, is that lawyers have a reputation for padding their fees, for doing more work than is necessary, for billing for time that they didn't need to spend on a case. Hourly fees were very common in corporate situations and also very common in insurance cases where an insured is having to defend a lawsuit such as an automobile accident case. They hire an attorney and that attorney charges by the hour. Because of the number of problems of padding hours, etc., a lot of insurance companies and corporations now are scrutinizing those hourly bills very carefully. And they won't pay for things that they think were not necessary. Also, one of the common things today is that if an act can be performed by a paralegal instead of a lawyer, many corporations and insurance companies expect the lawyer to use their paralegal to do that work and to charge a lesser hourly rate. So that's one of the issues with hourly fees. The issue with contingency fees is that it's argued that they encourage people to bring lawsuits because you're not paying for anything unless you win. People who may not have a great case are going to go to a lawyer. And in many instances, the lawyers, knowing that oftentimes people will settle the cases even though they are not liable or may not be liable, will bring those cases anyway and try and get a quick settlement, even for a smaller amount, just so that they get some money and the client gets some money. So it tends to increase the amount of litigation. On the flip side of that, though, the argument is made that without contingency fees, a lot of people would go without their problems or their issues being addressed because they wouldn't be able to afford an attorney. So if you were wronged by a large corporation and in a personal injury case, for example, if you couldn't afford an attorney, you might not be able to do anything about it. And you might have a permanent injury that costs the taxpayers money in terms of welfare or other kinds of benefits. So that can be problematic. By having contingency fee situations, lawyers can bring those cases anyway and hope to get paid. Okay, so we'll stop there with part 2.